right. Um, that's a good 30 seconds. I think that's for we're gonna start on time. Okay. It's not we're in corporate time. We're not on Latino time. Okay. So we're gonna kick it off here on time. So welcome everybody. If you're joining us live for this fantastic webinar, this fantastic topic, you are in for a treat. I want to do let you know that this will be recorded, and we will send it recorded to all the 6,000 members of the Alumni Society and everybody else who RSVP for this webinar, our various allies and BERGs and community organizations across the country. The Alumni Society was founded 10 years ago, and it was really to instigate awareness, networking, and collaboration among the different Latino alumni groups from highly selective university and college throughout the US. If you don't know this, only 33% of our Hispanic community makes it to college, and only half of us are graduating. And the actual graduation rate of Latinos in these elite schools is much higher, so like 95%. But only 11% of ours make it to these highly selective institutions. I'm only sharing this to highlight how pivotal it is for the Alumni Society community and how much we appreciate you being here. And I hope at some point we'll get to see you in person, cross passing persons, be warm with each other. We got a fantastic National Leadership Summit coming up in Chicago in June of 2025. So we hope to see you there. And while we're talking about statistics, any of you happen to know that 80% of the Fortune 500 CEOs played competitive sports at some point? And that's actually not a coincidence and very much ties into the topic that we're talking about. The discipline, the resilience, the teamwork learned through physical challenges does translate directly into leadership lessons and strategies. And your panelists today are living proof of that connection. So, welcome to our panel, From Peaks to the Boardroom, How Hiking and Sports Shape Leadership. And we're going to be exploring how endurance, risk-taking, and resiliency in the great outdoors mirrors the challenges of leading various organizations. And whether you're an athlete, or you're an adventurer, or you're a mountaineer, or you're just someone looking for leadership inspiration, this conversation is for you. So the three leaders joining us today, not only have they conquered businesses' challenges in their own respective way, but they have also very purposely and intentionally embraced adventure beyond the office. So during this 1 hour, we're going to quickly cover how they have done many of these things. And in order for us to maximize this 1 hour, I'm going to skip all their professional accolades. And instead, I'm going to encourage you to review their LinkedIn profiles, which I know is going to be shared in the chat box. It's been shared also in the invite. Go to the LinkedIn profiles, review their amazing business accolades, and instead, we're just going to dive right into their amazing inspirational stories. And we know that Latinos overall, we're all natural storytellers. So I promise you, this is going to be really, really good. So talking about origin stories, right? Every great superhero out there has an amazing origin story. And I kind of wanted to set the tone with that by each of our panelists sharing their origin story. And I'm sure Marcelo and Jose will agree with me that ladies should be first. So Nina, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, that's not fair. I'm happy to go first, and thank you for Giovanni, thank you for the beautiful invitation to be here. I say that I am honored because I've had the chance to either know or research my two colleagues on the panel, and they are absolutely the definition of success. And so I'm excited to share the virtual stage with you and know that I'm honored. I'm glad that you asked about the origin story, because who we are is so deeply impacted to how we grew up. And I'll go through mine fairly quickly. I am an immigrant technically to this country. My mother and father were immigrants in the 1960s. My father had a job offer and he moved him and his wife, 18 and 17 years old. They left Quito, Ecuador, and they moved to Los Angeles, California. And they very quickly figured out that the way to their American dream was through entrepreneurship. So I come from a family of 6 children, 5 living, most of which are all of which have an entrepreneurial mindset. I grew up watching my family rise and fail, and I learned the resilience of entrepreneurship and the discipline and the peaks and valleys at a very young age. And so that's my origin story. Growing up in an entrepreneurial family has impacted me so deeply that you see a little bit of that in my future story, which I'm sure we'll get to, but those are my origins and those are my beginnings.
Can you also mention a little bit how you transitioned from cheerleading into being a triathlete?
Sure. So I was a collegiate cheerleader. Don't laugh. I've always been interested in fitness at a very young age. I was a collegiate cheerleader at my alma mater. I moved from Los Angeles to Texas, the great state of Texas, and I tore my ACL during my varsity year. I was devastated. It was my varsity year. It was prior to graduation, and it was probably one of the best gifts I've received. In all tragedy, you can always find something good. For me, that something good was the awareness about triathlons. And so, as I was recovering with my ACL repair, the doctor told me that I would have to strengthen the muscles around my knee, especially in the future. And so, obviously, I can't ski, play tennis, or basketball, but triathlon was the perfect sport for me to continue my fitness journey and continue to exercise the muscles around me. So I raced in my first triathlon in 1996, which was the Danskin All Women's Triathlon. That's 29 years ago. I coincidentally started my business in 1996. And so that is how I shifted from being a cheerleader to being a triathlete. And for the last 29 years, I've had the privilege of racing on and off for those 29 years, in between birthing 4 children. But in those 29 years, I've had the honor and privilege of racing in the age group national championships for triathlon in my 40s and in my 50s, swimming 2.5 miles in the Waikiki Rough Water Swim,
Wow.
and, swimming from Alcatraz home, the New York City Marathon, and of course, but not least, across the finish line of 670.3 Ironman races. So it's been a
Yeah.
long journey from cheerleading.
Yeah, no, amazing. And I know from not firsthand experience, but from other friends that that's a lifestyle choice that you're making. So appreciate you sharing that with us. Marcelo, why don't you jump right in and tell us your origin story and a little bit how you transition from tech into mountaineering.
Oh, no, thank you. Absolutely. So, thanks everyone for having me. Also honored to be in this panel with all of you. Um, Marcelo is from Argentina. I guess you guessed that because of this accent. We cannot hide it, right? I came to the US 22 years ago, technology executive. I went from being a technology executive to being an investor and now a coach. Um, my superhero story, I don't know if it is superhero, but my grandfather was a superhero, right? He came to Argentina from Italy. El Nono used to say that you shouldn't leave this world with any fear in your pocket, right? And I took that, I think, literally. So I got into sports, because always I wanted to challenge myself to overcome some personal fears and I would say limiting mindsets. So I started running marathons, despite of having flat feet. My mother
Oh,
always told me, "Oh, you shouldn't run with flat feet, right?" So don't tell Marcelo he cannot do something because he would probably do it, right? So I finished a few of them. That was my first endurance sport. Then I got as Nina into triathlons, did a few of them, those long distance competitions, and I had fear to swim in open water, right? So that was, Nina will understand this. You start one of those triathlons with, now we start in waves, but my times we started like 3,000 people out together. So it was like swimming in a washing machine, so to speak, right? And
Exactly.
and last, had pretty much, afraid of heights, right? Even standing on a balcony was something that was freaking me out. So I pushed myself into mountain climbing. That's where I got to the story I'm gonna share later on. But every 2 3 years, I got myself to stretch my limits, learn something new, and honestly, it's meeting new people that are different to what I do in a daily basis, and as my grandfather said, less fear in my pockets feels like living lighter. So that's the story behind.
Yeah, I
Beautiful.
love your comment on meeting people because I could also share that same sentiment. One of the best parts about trekking is the unique individuals that you meet along that journey, right? Everybody has a really cool story, and I think that's one of the highlights. Jose, actually, I've trekked with Jose a couple of times in some of the most
Yeah.
exotic parts of the world, Machu Picchu, Nepal, going to Mount Everest.
Wow.
So, Jose, why
Ecuador.
don't you, Ecuador? That's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's
I'm
right.
I'm going to
With
Yeah.
the
Nepal in
Paxi.
March.
Are
There
you?
you
Oh,
go.
great. Let's make sure we
So,
connect before that.
Okay.
so, so, Jose, let us know what's your origin story and how do you transition from executive to pulling all your friends together into doing hiking and trekking for kids?
Well, listen, first of all, Giovanni, thanks so much for the invitation to be here with all of you. And Marcelo, it's a pleasure to meet you. And Nina, so good to see you again after a long time. And to all of you following us online today, thanks for joining us and honored to be here with you. Listen, my origin story, I'm very much an immigrant background as well. My mother was both my parents have passed now. But my mother was a Cuban exile. She went to study her freshman year at LSU in New Orleans, and the revolution hit, and she never went home. She never went back to Cuba after went registered for freshman year and stayed there. And then my father was in New Orleans. He was a Spaniard. He was born in Spain. He was an orphan of the Spanish Civil War here in Madrid, and they met. He was actually a priest for 20 years, and he was in
Wow.
New Orleans. And God, he felt that God called him to change his life and become a layperson, and then in that process met my mother. And so, a Cuban exile and a laicized Franciscan priest. So we started from nothing. My family started with nothing, and my father went on to become a professor at Georgia State, retired as one of the favorite professors at the university. And
I
my
can
mother
I can
dedicated
see that.
herself to us.
I
Huh?
I can see that because I've had the pleasure of meeting your
Yeah.
father and interacting with him. So I could see him getting that accolade at Georgia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was a great a great man and loved by many. And my mother dedicated herself to us, and so we were brought up with that work ethic and with the that resilience and if you set your mind to something, you can achieve it, right? Especially when you're born into a humble background, right? So you have to become who you are, and everything that you do is a product of what you've done, providence, and a little bit of luck as well along the way, right? And
100%.
so I'm living here in Madrid, Spain now, and I call myself one of the only Latin rednecks you're going to meet here in Spain because born in the deep south. I keep I'm very proud of my southern roots and try to cultivate them as much as I can. And as Giovanni said, yeah, Giovanni and I met Wow, I'm going to say probably about 25 years ago almost. 25 years ago, you had just I don't know, graduated from college at that time and were living in Atlanta. And you came into and the community that we lived in Atlanta. There's a big Cuban exile community, a big Latin community, Latin American community in Atlanta, and everyone helped each other out, and so you grow up with a sense of we help each other. We help each other, move forward. And I think in that's been critical in my journey as a professional, and also in as you mentioned, the trekking organization, Yolani, Trekking for Kids, or TFK Adventures as we call it now. It's a social impact company. It's another way of saying a nonprofit, and it's turning 20 years old. This year we've been around for 20
Right.
years, and we've trekked about 40 countries, and have raised millions of dollars for orphans, orphan children, needy children around the world. And you learn so much, and it takes professional acumen to run something like that and keep it going, but you also learn a lot from that to apply as well in your professional life as well. And I think we're going to probably talk about a little bit of that
Yeah,
too.
I put the link of Trekking for Kids in the chat for those who are interested in even upcoming trips and all of that. And if you don't mind, Jose, let's stick with you for a second because you run Terratest Group, which is basically a global geotechnical, not geopolitical, geotechnical.
Not yet.
Not yet,
Not
yeah,
that I
not
know
yet.
of.
I'm sure there's a lot of politics involved, but geotechnical construction company that, man, it involves a lot of risk assessment. So maybe you could comment on how hiking and trekking influence your ability to assess and mitigate risk.
Yeah, well, listen, it's a great question. Especially geotechnical engineering is very unique, right? And it's the first in, first out in any construction project, any engineering project, right? Even the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge that you have on your background there, right? It's everything that we do. No one sees, right? Because it's deep down in the ground when the final product is done, it's not there. You can't see it, right? But it is there. And the ground itself, when you start digging, it's there is a lot of science, but there's a little bit of art too, because you never really know what you're going to find until you start digging. So you have to mitigate risk every day in every project. I mean, it starts from the operations side, but it goes all the way to the P&L and to what kind of margin you're eventually going to have in a certain project. And what do you have to do? You have to predict, right? What you have to obviously set your course, set your route, set your path, which is the project itself, the timeline, the ground, the what you're going to need from materials, crews, etc., machines, equipment, and rigs, and then how long is it going to take you to get there? And you have to plan for weather. You have to plan for yeah, you said geopolitical. You got to plan for if diesel prices go up. In our business, one of our largest costs is diesel, right? To run
Mm.
to run rigs. And so you've got to predict all that. It's the same thing with hiking in many ways, right? I mean, you can set out for the path, right? You're gonna go on a trail. For example, if you're gonna go climb Kilimanjaro, you can take the Machame route, or you can take the Coca-Cola route, or you can take the 4-day route, right? And each one is going to be, but you know what? The climate's going to be different. You're going to go through different ecosystems. You could get, as I did, malaria on the way up. There could be a snowstorm. You've got to. So what do you have to do? You have to prepare, and you have to really look into the future and say, okay, what risk am I going to have, and how can I mitigate that? And so risk management is I think key to business. Certainly key in my industry, because you have a series of of factors that you can't control. And for us and our business, a lot of it is environmental. We can't control the weather, and that's just
Yeah.
that's just it. And it's the same thing when you trek. So what do you have to do? You have to be prepared, but you can't be overly prepared either, right? I mean, you can't take a 50-pound backpack, right, full of everything that you could
That's
buy
right.
on the
That's right.
eye, right? Because
That's right.
you physically can't make it. You're going to go broke. Same thing in business, right? I mean, you can't overplan and you can't over-engineer something. No, you're not going to make any money, right? So there's a ton of similarities that I see and that I apply in both worlds.
I what I'm also extrapolating from your comments is there's a lot of introspection that takes place from preparation, right? Like running scenarios in your mind
Scenario
at a
planning.
minimum so that the mind be ready to respond, not react, right? That difference between responding and
Yeah.
reacting. So I really like that comment. And Nina, you're
Yeah.
no stranger to this. You're an entrepreneur who built a global workforce solution firm. I'd be curious about your comments on how do you apply those lessons of endurance from sports into scaling a business?
First of all, I'm appreciating the idea that I show up to share and I end up learning. So that's so beautiful. I thought, Jose, you just characterized it so beautiful. It is not by accident that I started my triathlon career and the business that I run today at the same time in parallel. Both were founded in 1996. And I started Pinnacle from my apartment living room floor, and today we have a presence in 25 countries. And the similarity or the learning, and the only reason I show up to share is to share in hopes that others will see themselves and hopefully take a little piece of that into their own lives. But the similarity between both of them is this whole notion of reinventing yourself. That's what I characterize entrepreneurship. You're reinventing yourself, the resilience of scale, going from your apartment living room floor to a local company, a regional company, a national company, and now a global company takes endurance. It takes resilience. And I feel like I've been practicing that for 29 years because we cannot become what we don't practice. And so as you're going through the ascension of business, you're going through trials and tribulations and unfairness and challenges. It's the same thing when you're in a swim, a bike, or a run. In fact, swimming, you and I had this conversation, is so analogous to business in my mind because you're taking the risk of throwing yourself out there and you're getting beat up in many cases. I'm 5 feet tall. When I swim, luckily they'll put the women together with the men, but sometimes the men catch up to the women, and I've been kicked, I've been shoved, I've swam with sharks, and that is no different than in business. And so sometimes in the swim, you have got to just put your head down and believe in yourself, take a deep breath, not get out of control, because like in life, when you get out of control, you can't think. And so for me, swimming, biking, and running has taught me so much about myself because I suspect that most people, the thing standing in the way of what they want is usually, not always, broadly speaking, it's themselves. That knowing that fears and the doubts that we all carry that fear, that doubt, knowing that those fears and those doubts don't define you. What defines you is your ability to overcome them. What defines you is your ability to rise up and challenge yourself. And so I find that when I'm practicing that off business, it naturally seeps into my business life because we're only one person. We can't be one person in business and one person at home. We're just one human. And so the more we practice resilience, practice discipline, practice consistency in our businesses and in our lives, I feel like that has been the culmination. And then the cherry on top, which Jose, I love your story. The cherry on top is when you can actually use that for good. So in 2016, Ecuador had a huge earthquake, and my mother called me and she said, "Mija, what are you going to do about Ecuador?" And I was triggered by the phone call. What do you mean? What am I going to do about Ecuador? That's for the American Red Cross or, the government. I mean, there's nothing I can do. And she reminded me that we can't all put everyone's problems on our back, but we can do our part. And so I decided to sign up for a race in Mantas, an Ironman race in Mantas, a 70.3, and raise money and partner with people and use the passion. And I'm proud to say we were able to build 40 homes in the coast of Ecuador as a result. And so, Jose, I love your story and your foundation and what you're doing. And I've tried to bring my passion into helping, and being for good.
Yeah.
But for me, racing has been such good practice for my business life. It's almost it's really incredible.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's inspirational, both of you, and I'm grateful for the clarity which you brought into this, especially what you just said really resonated with myself and several of the audience members. The concept that you cannot become that which you want unless you're practicing it, right? Like you're practicing it. And Marcelo, I think you've done a lot of practice around yourself. And in fact, 2024 was a big year for you. You published an amazing practical book, which I just finished reading yesterday. Okay.
Oh,
Called
well,
Figure Eight, which has to do with mountaineering, the knot eight, right? And I got a lot of different golden nuggets of wisdom from your book. However, one of the things that I think really, stood out for me was something that any hiker and mountaineer knows very well, which is the tragedy that happened in Mount Everest a few years ago. And you were part of that, and your book mentions that. Can you, share with us that story? And then as you do that, can you help us tie that back? What sort of decision-making strategies do you bring to the boardroom when it comes to moments of difficult, complex situations and tragedies?
oh, happy to do that, and thanks for reading the book. And difficult to follow Nina and Jose. And Nina will be happy to know I was climbing in Ecuador in October, the Chimborazo, Cotopaxi,
Oh,
Mm.
so
Cerro
beautiful.
Corazón, Linizas Norte, Sur. So amazing country. My wife was born in Ecuador. So
So
I
you
tell you,
have great taste, Marcelo.
yes, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So, I started mountaineering in 2010. That was in New Zealand when I got my first climbing training. You get to learn the basics, learning the ropes, literally, right? And after that, I fell in love with the sport. Honestly, explore many different peaks. If you go to Europe, you need to climb Mont Blanc, but I have to tell you that many other nice mountains around Mont Blanc that are uh, even more difficult to climb. So we did many of those. We went to Latin America, did Aconcagua, Ojos de Salado, that's in Argentina, and visited the Himalayas at that point. I did my first 8,000-meter peaks with Amadablan and Manaslu. And that's where I met Everest for the first time. I do remember, you know, looking at the mountain, and I said, I have to come back here one of these days. And I went there, right? And Everest and I had kind of difficult story, to be honest with you. I went in 2014. That's a year that there was an avalanche, one of the largest in the history of Everest. We were climbing in the morning, and we lost 15 colleagues all at once. And five of them were in my team, and one of them was a very close friend of mine from Nepal. Took some time to recover from that. I came back in 2016 for my second attempt, and everything was going well up until I got to Camp 3, top of country. I got the pulmonary edema, and I have to come back, right? And I keep saying that was the hardest day of my life. But as Nina said, even the most tragic incidents in life, teach you something, right? So, started a new chapter of my life, right? And I think I gained a completely different appreciation of how to spend my time, right? What things I do with my time, which is the only thing I cannot buy more, right? I mean, the rest comes and goes. So how you link those experiences to business, right? Well, I would say a couple of lessons, right? One is something that also Nina mentioned, is the importance of knowing when to pivot or change trajectory, right? Climbing Everest is not only a test of endurance, but it's a test of decision making. I can tell you in almost every expedition I've been, there comes a moment in when there is a large change in the context, right? There could be, an avalanche, change in the weather, a climbing colleague that gets sick, and and after all that time that you put behind training and climbing, you might have to make the hardest call, which is, do we push forward or do we really turn back? And even that decision is even more difficult when you're about to summit, right? Which was my case. So leading large transformations in business is not that different, right? I mean, when you're pushing boundaries, typically in organizations, you're trying to move organizations and people out of business as usual or our comfort zone, building new business models, bringing new technologies. There are going to be obstacles and challenges that are inevitable, right? It's the way business works, and knowing when to pivot is an exercise in balancing. I always say balancing ego and growth, right? No
Yeah.
one likes to lose. No one likes to lose or quit in anything. Obviously, looks bad, right? But I think real leadership is about recognizing when you need to press on, uh, and when you really need to step back and create a stronger future opportunity. Mm, even most of the times we don't notice that even in the worst failures, there is a lot of learning capital that we build through the process. And if we choose to see those setbacks as learning capital, that becomes a foundation of resilience and eventually future growth, right? So we're living in a world that technology is changing life, business, everything. So the ability to learn and unlearn fast, I do think it's a competitive advantage for any organization. And the second last thing I think I go from mountaineering is about leadership values, right? And leading from those values. I always say that after 8,000 meters, when oxygen is a luxury and temperatures are below 20 Celsius, and even need to work to get a glass of water, your business title, what says in your business card, is useless, right? It's completely useless.
That's so true.
What matters is who you are, the values you operate from, and the same applies to lead in large transformations. When pressure and uncertainty are high in business and, decisions are difficult to make, I always say, let's go back to the values of our organization. Let's go back to our personal values and lead from there, right? I mean, it might not be the most optimal decision, let me tell you, but I can guarantee you that most of the time it's going to be the right decision, right? But takes time and intention and understanding of ourselves and our teams to lead from that place. So those are the two things. If they make sense.
I listening to your comments, it really, especially around values and ego, it reminded me of why I personally decided not to climb Mount Everest or pursue that goal. Because when I went to base camp and I was looking at this and I was really reflecting about my motivation on summiting, I realized that my primary motivation would have been ego driven, not value driven. And as soon as I realized that, I was like, oh, okay, I'm good with this. I'm good. I'm good with being at base camp. I'm good with soaking this adventure in. But I don't need to summit. So it's interesting to see how what you're articulating for me, it reminded me right away of that of moment of decision. And of course, setbacks, right? That was fantastic commentary. You as an entrepreneur, obviously, you mentioned it already, the bunch of setbacks, and I love your swimming metaphor. Marcelo mentioned it as kind of like the drying, spinning, the washing, right? The
Washing
washing
machine.
No,
machine.
it
Nina
feels
will
exactly
understand
like
that.
that. It feels
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
like that, especially when you're turning the corner at the buoy. Everybody
Oh, yeah.
is it feels like everyone is there stuck trying to get out.
I just remember from our conversation, Nina, that you also mentioned you share with me a passion for hating running. We both really loathe running.
So,
And I'm wondering if you could share with us those comments and tie them to entrepreneurship.
sure. First of all, I love what you said about ego, and that in business and in life and in sports, there is no place for ego. And it's a practicing of humility. And for me, that's what the run is. For me, again, when you're swimming, it's about risk, it's about resilience, it's about punching above your weight class, it's about not overheating yourself. But once you're done with the swim and you're on the bike, you're in front of a lot of people, but you're also behind many others. Kind of in life, there's people ahead of you and there's people behind you. And so the bike really, for me, is about teaching me how to keep pedaling despite the awards. Don't rest on your laurels, despite how great, Pinnacle was on the Inc. 500, 5,000 list of fastest growing companies over a decade. You can't rely on that. Like, keep going, keep pedaling, because if you don't keep pedaling, someone is going to pass you. But the run really is about attacking your ego. For me, the run is about humility, and it's about heart. It's how badly do you want it? And a lot of times entrepreneurship is about that. How badly do you want it? Are you disciplined enough? Do you have the consistency? Are you doing the right things? Are you delaying gratification? I love what you said, Marcelo, about leading with your values. For me, the run, because there's a saying that we have in triathlon, it sucks until it doesn't. And it sucks to do things that you don't like. It really does. Like, I don't like to go out there and run, but if I consistently, and I have the discipline and the consistency to go out there over and over and over again, one day I wake up and I could do 5 miles for breakfast. And it just happens only when you have the consistency and the discipline. I mean, the answer to everything is consistency and discipline in business and in life. But for me, the run was about humility, because as I grew my career and we were getting success, and I went from an entrepreneur to an operator to a CEO to a global CEO to a public company director to a presidential appointee, one might think your head goes here. But man, you put yourself on the run when people are passing you like you're standing still, you're not so hot. It's a gentle reminder that you should be humble and grateful. And there's a lot of people that are doing some pretty amazing things. So that's what the run means to me.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm only laughing because I could empathize with everything that you're sharing there. That's fantastic.
And
Um, thank-
there's this tiny little thing about triathlons where they put your age on your left calf. And it's an interesting phenomenon, because when she's younger and passes you, I mean, triathlon is about you, it's about yourself, it's about discovering what you and your body can do. So that's another thing I love. It's you against you. But every now and then, a little competition is always nice. And when she passes you and she's younger, you're like, oh no, she's younger, she's faster. But when she's older, you're like, hell no. And all of a sudden it motivates you. So it's a little
yeah,
interesting dynamic.
no, you listen. Yeah, your comments earlier about ego. You said there's no place for ego in the workplace. I would maybe mold that a little bit differently. I would say sometimes I do rely on my ego, kind of like what you just said, right? To motivate
Right,
yourself and
right,
do that, right?
right.
Uh, and I think the distinction that I would make is between a healthy ego, right? Knowing that it has a place, it could serve the individual and the community well versus a toxic ego, right? Like me standing on the Mount Everest base camp, I knew that would have been a toxic goal for me. That wouldn't have been a healthy goal. So
That's a
you
good
just you
catch.
just made you just made that clear for me in my mind.
It's a good catch for me. What I was trying to say is that for me, when you're leading and you are a leader, you are responsible for creating the conditions for others to succeed. So it is no longer about you, it's about helping create the conditions for others to succeed. And so when you're focused on servant leadership and you're focused on other people, you're really not focused on yourself. And it's something that I have learned to refine a long time ago, and really based on values of leadership at Pinnacle. That is the definition of leadership. You've got to be creating the conditions for others to succeed.
Yeah, I think you would also appreciate this quote that I learned yesterday at an entrepreneurship conference. This guy basically said to me, "Look, you want to know what entrepreneurship is? It's working 80 hours for yourself instead of 40 hours in somebody else's dream." And I was like, "Whoa, that's simple and
Yeah.
straightforward." I think your
Very
comments
powerful.
reflect that, you
Amen.
know? Yeah, and Jose, I'm curious. You mentioned earlier in your comments, the importance of planning, but how do you balance that strategic patience that you need for long-term business and long-term massive projects like the ones that you work on with the decisiveness, right, that is required in outdoor challenges like trekking or mountaineering?
Well, it's a good question, and I think that I like how you say strategic patience, right? Because sometimes we can be patient, and patience is a virtue, right? And we all know that. But sometimes you can be patient too long, and you can be and you're being patient and there's no end in sight, right? So I think being strategic is important, and the word strategy is important because why? Strategy is all about getting to an end, right? Doing something purposefully to get somewhere with a certain benefit, right? But there's a lot involved in that, right? There's time frames, there's cost, there's risks, there's outlays that you have to put out, and so yeah, long projects and the construction engineering, yeah, I mean there's a lot of projects take a while. They take a while, and a lot of things can happen during that time, right? Your client can change direction. Your client can say, okay, listen, I started with it, but now I want to add this, and I want to add that, and I want to add that. And before you know it, you're building a very, very different, doing a very, very different project. And your costs can get out of whack. Things can change. So sometimes, in that strategic, in that journey, you do have to be strategic. It's like, all right, you know what? Am I staying true to what is good for me and also meeting the customer's needs or the client's needs? But at what point do we have to say no and we have to pivot, right? And Marcelo, it's interesting you were talking about pivoting, and I'm sorry about my condolences for your friends on Everest. I was actually there the year after the avalanche, and with two of our lead trekkers had actually been on Everest at that time as well, and had been in the recovery efforts in base camp the year before. So I'm sorry you had to live through that, and sorry for your loss. But you have to learn how to pivot. I mean, listen, Giovanni, I was just thinking about when we were on Mount Cotopaxi, I think it was 2009. Okay. And we had prepared for that trek. We were, this was a trekking for kids, and we had 20 people on that hike. We had Luis Benitez, who's our lead trekker for trekking for kids. Luis had the world record for the greatest number of ascents of Everest. He's from
I
Ecuador.
remember that.
He's a
Yeah.
dear friend of mine. And this was his 99th summit of Cotopaxi. Okay. And Giovanni was there, and you train and you spend training. You go to Boxy. It is a technical climb. It is all crampons, sheer ice, like Chimborazo. I mean, it's not an easy. It's not a walk in the park, and you have to prepare. And well, we set out. We had 20 people. We had done some acclimating hikes that week, and the night that we were supposed to summit, we had clouds roll in. And we waited and we
Wow.
waited and we said, okay, are we going to go? Are we going to go? Finally, we saw that it cleared up. We had a hole in the clouds, literally, and so we started climbing. And about 1 o'clock in the morning or something. And what happened? What happened later? As dawn came, we had a storm. And it started snowing. We were in whiteout conditions, and we had five rope teams. And our first rope team made it to the summit. And then we were in the third rope team. Giovanni, I think you were in the second rope team. I was in the third. And we couldn't see. I mean, you couldn't see. It was a point where you couldn't see 10, 20 feet in front of because it was snowing
Wow.
horizontally. And Luis, looks at me and he says, Jose, I think we got to call this. What do you think? I said, look, man, I have to be humble here. I know there's a lot of people that want to make it, that want to summit. We were 300 feet from the summit, which
Wow.
19,300, you know, and we turned around
Decent.
and I said, Luis, let's call it. We've got to do this. People were upset. There were some people that
Yeah.
were upset. Giovanni, you remember some of the dynamics that we had there up at the top of the mountain. But, I felt as the head of the organization that I had to also say, okay, you know what, we got to
Yeah.
pivot. But at the same time, the humility there, you mentioned humility, Nina and Marcelo, is that, you also as a leader have to delegate in the people who know their trade. And when I have someone like Luis say, we got to turn back because this is a safe thing to do, I said, you know what? You
Yeah.
can't even question it. You gotta trust people. So you gotta be able to pivot, and you've got to be able to be humble about understanding that sometimes the strategic thing to do is to say, you know what, pivot or quit, or strategic quitting, right? Because to continue to go further would have put us all in peril. And because of ego, a lot of us would have wanted to go, oh, we're almost there. Well, I can see it. I can see it. Forget it. The right thing to do is to go back, and that is a very hard call to make. I think in all dimensions of life, but especially in business, because you have so many pressures, many times saying you don't quit, you got to keep doing it, you got to keep doing it. And I think the true leader sometimes is the one that says, you know what, let's let's stop this, let's stop doing this, and let's just pivot and do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. When someone like Luis tells you, hey, let's back off, you back off.
Yeah.
What a
That's your
story.
yeah, your comment actually reminded me of the weekly conversations I have with my attorneys. Okay. Because the attorneys are there as legal experts, and I'm trying to run a business, right? I'm trying to run the business, but they're like, no, Giovanni, like this is the liability that it creates. And the good news is that most of the time I listen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Most of the time. Uh, Marcelo, many leaders struggle with personal growth outside of their professional day-to-day. So how you as an IT executive who led some multinational companies, I believe you've done a great job at integrating adventure, right? Your mountaineering, and tell me how you done that, in how that's become part of your leadership journey.
I think, Giovanni, as I said at the beginning, I try to learn something new every now and then, right? And that's at the core of the motivation. right? Try to push my personal limits. All these sports, as Jose and Nina were saying before, you at one point or the other, you're pushing your physical limits, your mental limits, you're testing your values, right? So I, I honestly do not feel like it was an integration. I feel I'm doing what I like to do, and I'm feeling that doing that I learn about myself. I'm I have met amazing people climbing or doing triathlons, right? People that is today I can pick up the phone, I have a conversation, or go to Asia and go to eat with the family in the middle of the Kumbu Valley, right? And and that gives me joy, right? I mean, I think again, I I think you want to have a good time. And if having a good time is about learning or doing extreme sports or reading 1,000 books in 1 week, just do it, right? Because we have limited time on these planets, right? And I learned that, I was feeling that time was infinite. Uh, Life showed me that it's not, and make sure you spend every single second of your life doing things that brings you joy, that you learn, that you experience new things, get to know new people, and the more you know, the better. I think the better leader you become, and the better decisions you make, because you have such a larger perspective. But when someone tells you this is good, you can say, "Well, this is good compared with what? With this, with this, with this, with this," and your perspective and decision making process is enriched as a result of that. So, you know, long answer to your short question, but it's have a good time.
No, I like that. I
I
I
like
love
it.
the simplicity of that, right? It's like, yes, pursue joy, right? Versus I think happiness is part of that call, right? But I love your use of the word joy instead, because it's almost like an elevated sense of happiness, right? And I found that hiking and trekking uh has contributed to that joy immensely, that journey, as I hear from your voice and your storytelling with us. So look, we're in the last leg of this conversation, of this dialogue. So I'm wondering if you could each leave us with one last comment around how, I don't know, a pivotal lesson that stands out to you from your outdoor challenges that has directly influenced your approach to business, that you might have not mentioned but would like to leave us with. And why don't you kick us off, Jose, and then we'll go to Marcelo and we end up with Nina.
Well, okay. Well, first of all, thanks again, Giovanni. This has been wonderful, and Nina and Marcelo, what a great conversation. The hour's flown by. But I think that if I were to one of my biggest learnings from the outdoors and from trekking and from high altitude mountaineering is that always be summit aware. And what I mean by that is that what you say yourself, okay, listen, the summit is 8,300 meters for Everest, 19,300 for Kilimanjaro, that's a summit and I got to get there. And that may be the physical summit, but for you, don't overlook the summits that you may have along that path, right? Because many times, the your actual summit, and this translates to the boardroom, right? The actual one may not be that destination or that 5 year that 5 year strategic plan that you have, but it's those discoveries that you make, right? And those moments of growth for you and the company that you have, you and your organization, that you have along the way, that those summits, if you add them all together, they may even be higher than that eventual summit, right? So find your summit and be summit aware. That is what I've learned.
Fantastic. What about you, Marcelo?
I'm writing that down, Summit Aware. I love
Yeah.
it. Um, every climb uh, I have done, I learned that, it's starts with a single step, right? and every business transformation is the same, right? So I would say if you dare to take the first step and then have the confidence and the courage to take another and another, and you surround with great people, right? Before you know it, the impossible pole becomes a reality. I always like to remember a quote from Mandela. He said, it always seems impossible until it's done, right? So trust yourself, surround yourself with great people, and make that first step, right? As Nina said, wake up in the morning, do the first run, and then the second, the third, the fourth, and suddenly you are running an Ironman competition.
It's amazing. Lina, take us home.
I just have enjoyed this conversation so much. Jose and Marcelo, you're so inspirational, really. I'll pick up from where Marcelo left off about, for me, the hardest line to cross is not the finish line, it's the starting line. Back to your point, taking one step. So for me, crossing the hardest line to cross is the starting line. But there's a quote that I love, just to build on what you said about personal growth. When I look at my entrepreneurial career and I look at my triathlon career, they're all about personal growth and learning something about yourself and your capabilities. And for me, there's a beautiful quote that I love, and that is, "He who looks outwardly dreams, but he that looks inwardly awakens." And for me, personal growth begins with you, and getting out and taking personal responsibility for your life, and not being a victim of your circumstances, but a creator of your life. And for me, it has been an incredible journey, of doing exactly that. The way that I'm chasing the next best version of myself is with that mentality. It is about looking in the mirror, learning more about myself, getting curious, stretching my limits, and overall, slowly but surely, with a learning mindset, becoming the next version. So for me, I'm a huge, huge advocate about personal growth. I love what Marcelo said about pursuing joy. I have found a way to find joy in the hard stuff, right? No, I mean, you find very few people in life that love to get their butt kicked. I'm one of them. I just enjoy it. I'm punching above my weight class, and I coach all the time. I these young kids that get out of a meeting and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know the answer. I feel so inadequate, or I feel so this or so that." And I'm constantly coaching them, like, learn how to find joy in punching above your weight class. Learn how to find joy in being the dumbest person in the room. Like, if you can wrap your mindset around learning and growing into the next version of yourself, then you have found a way, to personal growth.
Well, without a doubt, this has been the most energizing hour of my day. I'm very grateful to all three of you. I wish this was a long format, podcast format where I know we could talk for hours around a fireplace. And maybe we could do that at some point in person, right?
I know.
If I could get Jose
Yeah.
from Madrid, Marcelo from Miami, Nina from Dallas, and
Would
I'm
love
here
it.
in LA.
I would love
love
that.
to do that in person. And
They're
to
very
everybody who joined
inspirational.
us, I hope you've taken some valuable lessons here. We have explored how hiking and sports build resiliency, teamwork, adaptability. These are skills that are essential for any leadership role in any industry. And you've heard some incredible stories of perseverance, risk-taking, and transformation from our panelists. And I challenge all of you to step outside of your comfort zone after listening to this webinar, whether it's hiking, sports, or any other challenge, because as our panelists have reinforced over and over again, growth happens when you push yourself out of the limits, out of your box. So a huge thanks again on behalf of the Alumni Society to our amazing panelists, Nina, Marcelo, and Jose. Thank you for sharing your golden nuggets of wisdom I look forward to revisiting the transcript and reviewing some of the lessons that you share with us and stories. You have affirmed the fact that Latinos are great storytellers. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Remember, leadership, like hiking a mountain, is all about the journey and not just the summit. So keep climbing, pa'lante, pa arriba. Okay?
I
Take care,
love it.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Love
All
it.
right,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Giovanni.